Okay, around the world in 18 minutes. Hong Kong edition. Take one. All right, so Ralph, here we are.
Hey, Gavin.
It's been long due.
Good to see you here on the home front.
Oh man,
You're not traveling. I can't believe it.
I can't believe we are both not traveling at the same time. We are in Hong Kong right now, and this is something that I wanted to do for a very long time already. It's been long due. We've been through quite a few of happy hours talking about conversations about solo traveling, about how two generations of solo traveling differ from each other, but then some of the key elements were still in the same spirit. Sitting beside me is Ralph. He's my ex-colleague, a fellow journalist and a professor in BU. So the reason why we connect with each other, I believe, is that throughout the countless happy hours when we were still working at the news company, we talk about endless topics. It's someone that I feel like once I sit down with him, I can talk for like hours or even days, just talking about traveling in general, life, the journey of self-discovery throughout their 20s and 30s. And it's an episode that I wanted to do for a very long time, and we finally here.
You forgot about basketball. We talk about that too.
Basketball, yeah, basketball coaching with your daughters. I think your daughters are in love with basketball as well, no?
True. Yeah, they can kick my you know what anytime. So
And ping
we'll
pong.
let them do the talking.
Remember,
And
we were
ping
always
pong.
playing ping pong at the office. You try.
You felt like I was scared of going against you. Yeah, you're right. I was.
No, you weren't.
I was scared. That freaked me out. I'm just a ball retriever, basically.
But it was a good time, and I haven't been sitting down in talking in the long format like a podcast in a while. I'm not sure about you. Has it been a long while for you?
It's been a couple of months. I did one at South China Morning Post in January, so I kind of remember some of the ins and outs, but it wasn't being filmed, it was only being recorded, so I just had to watch my voice and stay on topic.
Right.
There wasn't any of this equipment.
And now we're like, for me, I'm very happy that our conversation is finally put in record because from my experience throughout our conversations, I feel like for people of my age, I benefit a lot from learning from a mentor, from a past experience of solo travelers, a free spirit, because Ralph has been in Taiwan working as a freelance journalist for over a decade. So there must be struggles. There must be times where he was all alone and then in a new city that he has to rediscover himself and learning a new language, learn a new environment. And I believe that as our generation, more and more people try to pursue our work remotely, it's becoming more and more popular. I think more of our audience will benefit from our conversation. It's not just me, and I'm just happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I think I've been able to learn a lot from your generation as well, yourself, and we're surrounded by people at the newspaper office who are in your generation.
Right.
We have our differences and our similarities. It's good to cross over and learn from one another.
For sure. That's what it's all about. Because I think as a traveler, we all learn constantly. There's no, like for me, I learned from a young age that this learning pathway is never ending. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I do. I think we're always learning. If we're not learning, or if we think we're not learning, we're probably just not absorbing the information properly, or we're convinced that we know enough that we don't have to learn anymore. But we're always learning. We don't really have a choice, I think, as humans. Life will never be so settled that you can't learn something from the environment around you, whether you're traveling or not. So onward we go learning.
Because the thing is, when you're in a foreign country, you are kind of forced, in a way, to adapt, to learn in a very completely new environment. And this is something that you can't really absorb or do in an environment that we used to. Like, for example, when I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, and that decision that I bought a one-way ticket to Australia, it just changes my whole life. You know, I think it's for you the same too. That decision when you were in your 20s, bought the one-way ticket to exploring Southeast Asia, I must say.
When I was 23, I bought a one-way ticket to the southernmost part of Mexico on the Guatemala border. And I didn't know how long I was going to stay there. I had the option to teach English, which I did for a while. I didn't know much about that part of Mexico. I thought I did because I'd been to the north where a lot of Americans go, but I hadn't gone to the far south, and we're looking at a different culture. They didn't see very many Americans there, and people would stare at us. There was a bit of resentment against the U.S. because of the migration policy at the time against Mexico. I needed to get my Spanish into much better shape than it was, which I did. It improved. I wouldn't say it improved by a lot, but I was able to get around. And it was like, as you say, it was a constant learning journey, going out every day. I had to get up in a dark room. My room had no windows, and I had to go outside where I was living and look up and down the street to see, just to make sure I understood where I was. I had my internal compass to remind me how to get to where I could buy things. When you do that, this is before the internet, you meet a lot of people just in the process. I met other Americans and people from Mexico who were curious about Americans. So it's just like you meet, you talk, you meet, you talk, and then you build your network, build your connections, and it feels fun.
Right. It's so interesting because for our generation, I feel like we are less and less paying attention to this kind of muscle memories because all we can rely on is Google Maps, right? Like you don't really need to pay attention to your brain power. For example, I have been dating girls that don't even know like her surrounding neighborhoods, and it's fascinating. You can still survive in this era without knowing your neighborhood. And from your perspective, how you feel about it?
Well, we had two different ways of doing things. We could ask people. We did. We talked a lot. We needed to know the local language or how to find people who spoke English. So a lot of finding a way around came down to asking people where things were. And when I went to China for the first time, I had to ask a lot of people where things were, and most people would know. They didn't always know how to explain it, but they would always know the answer. And then when that didn't work out, we
You
had
always have a map.
we had little maps, little paper maps like this. So you could carry this. This is designed to put in your pocket.
Oh,
And then
it's called the pocket guide.
it's called the pocket guide.
China pocket.
This is to China. So anyway, the map folds out at the end. There may
Is
be
it
on the
a
map.
specific city at the end of the page there? You can show it to the viewers there. It's just at the end of the page. There's the city of
This is the city of Beijing.
Beijing.
This is the
right.
inner city of Beijing. Anyway, if you really want to go all out, you can get a much bigger map.
You got a bigger one. I know you have a bigger one.
So if you want to stand around on a street corner and let the whole world know you're a tourist, then you pull out the big map and you're staring at it like
That's
that.
a question I want to ask. Like, when you are traveling around at your era, like when you see people holding a map, then you straightly know they are traveling as well?
Usually. And we did make connections like that when you're taking a train, taking a bus, waiting in an
So
airport.
you are a traveler
You just
as well.
you recognize the prototype.
Yeah.
The way they're dressed, the maps they're holding, the
Okay.
fact that they're probably not from around there. And then you make your connections, make a lot of friends on the road.
Do you still remember how you dressed when you were traveling China?
Traveling in China, depending on the weather, if it was a coolish day like this, probably very much the way you see me now.
Right.
For comfortable shoes, nothing too fancy. I don't want that much attention. As an American in China, you have some ups and downs to getting along with the local population. So I try not to look too garish or too sloppy.
Well, I guess in the winter, do you have to wear the bean hats?
No bean hats.
No bean hats.
I'm not that old.
That's the main thing. Like, even though the technology has changed over the past 2-3 decades, some of the key elements don't ever change. Like weather, the cold weather. Like in Beijing, you still have to carry the heavy coats around you. When you're backpacking around China, you still have to carry your heavy backpack around. It's still the same. Like when I was traveling in Southeast Asia, I still have to carry my 20-25 kilo bags. Strolling through the city from city to city, from hostel to hostel. Was hostel a thing back then, or?
It was. In fact, my first trip across the United States, during that trip, I landed in a youth hostel. They call them youth hostels at that point, although any age group could go. And I stayed in a hostel for 7 days, and I paid a little bit of money, and I worked in the hostel cleaning up as a way to stay. I had very little money. So I worked, I paid a little bit, stayed for 7 days, had, 6 roommates living on bunk beds.
Did you make friends back there?
I remember connecting to people there. This is in Washington D.C., so there's a lot of turnover, and you meet
Right.
somebody on Tuesday, and by Thursday they're gone. So you make fast friends, and then you lose them a couple days later.
Yeah. And then the next day, the next morning, you wake up and then, oh, there's a different person on the, there's somebody else. For the viewers that maybe haven't tried hostels, some people need to catch a flight at like 7, 8 a.m. And then you wake up and then some new people checking in already. In Southeast Asia or even Australia, I've been living in hostels with like 20 people in the one room. Not sure if you have done it. 24 people in the one room, and then you can hear people snoring. People wake up with the alarm, but not waking up. Like just, the alarm keeps ringing for like an hour, and then some guy try to push her or him, try to wake her up, but it never happened. Yeah, it's a fun experience living in the hostels. Do you miss that in some way?
In some ways, I don't think I would do it again. We travel as a family sometimes, or I travel for work, and I prefer to have my own space, or at least to know who I'm living with. Because as you say, it can be a little chaotic. I don't want to be woken up by somebody else's alarm, or somebody else's snoring, or somebody else's early flight, or somebody else's late flight. So I used to be more tolerant and more versatile, but that's no longer the case.
It's always a love-hate relationship with the hostels. You love the fact that at night you can easily meet people. You can walk up to people and have some chat and share your travel experience. But then you have to certain amount of endurance with all the inconvenience of living in hostels.
Yeah, and I think at that age, maybe even at this age, you look at travel as just being a stream of excitement. Because you're not at home, it's a different experience. So that energy, that inertia, supersedes a lot of other things that might happen, a lot of other inconveniences. There might be some things that you wouldn't put up with at home, but you put up with on during travel because you're excited. And even if it gets really bad, you're gone in a day. How bad can it be if you're going to leave the city in a day?
It couldn't be that bad. It's just one day, You wake up and then it's a new day and well, of course, there are some bad days during your travels. You might lose your wallet. You might bump into a stranger, or it could be a bad conversation as well. But it's all part of travels, and in some ways, we made our choice ourselves. We choose to walk this path ourselves. So, for me, it's like you kind of need to be mentally prepared for all the bad things, for the space of good things to come around as well.
Yeah, and we learn from the bad days. We learn how not to repeat losing our wallets, or, when it comes to meeting strange strangers, you never really know. I don't know if you can guard against that. Like the journalist in me and the traveler likes to meet people no matter who they are. I try to avoid certain topics. It's like going to China, I try to avoid politics. But, other places, there are other sensitive things you just don't try to get into. But then sometimes people will come to you when they'll bring it up. So what are you going to say? Like going back to my trip to Mexico, when I was 23, like I didn't know that these people were going to start, they're nice people. They were nice to me, but they really didn't like Americans. They didn't like our rules and our laws and the immigration policy. You can watch TV there, and I watched all these cases of Mexicans being beaten at the border, and I'm in their country, and I just wasn't ready for that.
How do they portray their hate? Do they point fingers at you, or like do they show it directly?
They don't personalize it. They'll never assume that an American in their country is part of the problem. They can separate the people from the government and the law. But they ask, they'll say, well, what about this? You're from America. Do you realize what you're doing up there and how inconvenient it is for us? And if I just listen to them talk. What can I say?
Sometimes I think, yeah, that's what it's all about. Like you just sit down, even though like you might not completely get their side, but you still listen to like what they offer, their stories. And I think that's one important part of traveling as well.
In Mexico, a lot of things at that point didn't happen. Like sometimes you show up for things and the person you're supposed to meet isn't there, or sometimes the quality of the food and the drink isn't what you expect. You might get sick. I remember one time in Mexico trying to find a beach. And we just asking people. We had no maps at that point. Where the maps weren't very reliable. We didn't have the internet, of course, so we just kept on asking people.
Is maps not reliable?
Those maps were not reliable. There was a beach, but it was on a small island, and we couldn't get there from the mainland part of Mexico. And we kept asking people who would say, well, it's right up there, right around the corner. but it wasn't. They were just trying to be polite with us. They didn't want to make us feel discouraged. So they kept saying, just go over here and down there. But we were on foot. We didn't have any buses at that point, or trains. A very rural part of Mexico. We just kept walking and walking and walking. We finally found the coast, but it wasn't a beach.
Oh, so what do you see there?
Just saw the water and some construction work, and we had to turn around and go back. So
So in the end, you couldn't find the beach.
there's no beach. Not on the mainland part of Mexico. You had to go offshore somewhere.
Oh, you gotta swim.
You got to swim or get a boat. Yeah. And the water was warm, but I wasn't much of a swimmer then, so
I
decided to
mean,
call it off.
in the end, it's all about the journey, right? Like, it's one hell of experience. If it wasn't like this, you won't have a story like this to tell right now.
And when you come back, people want to hear your war stories.
They don't want to hear your good stories.
They want
It's
to hear
too
all
boring.
the strange stuff, like about the beach and that you couldn't find, and the people you asked,
Yeah.
the answers you got.
I guess you have many strange stories as well, especially the time when you were traveling in Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah, Southeast Asia, we traveled as a family there. We also traveled. I traveled solo often for work because I would, as a freelancer in Taipei, I would go to Southeast Asia for short jobs to cover something, or perhaps 2 or 3 stories in a 3-day trip.
What is it like to be in that city without speaking their same languages, without knowing somebody? You're just all alone, and you know that you are on this task, you have to accomplish this task, but you're all alone.
Depend a lot on local people. I guess that kind of goes back to my generation before the internet. I got used to using local people as my source of information. So not only as a reporter doing interviews, but just as a traveler. I just ask people from the concierge at a hotel to the front desk, the taxi drivers, the people in the airport, the people on the street. Like in the Philippines, for example, as you well know, people speak English. They're pretty friendly. They'll always stop and try to help you. And once you meet enough people, it doesn't seem lonely anymore. There's so much inertia built up on the local connections. Like by the time night falls and I'm alone in a hotel room, like I want to be alone by that point. I've had so many conversations with so many people.
Totally get that.
And then if you go back, like if you've been to Ho Chi Minh City, it's so many hotels in that city. You go to District 1 or District 3, you don't need a reservation to show up and say how much is your room rate. You go from hotel to hotel and just look at the rooms.
Really? So you go up to each hotel receptionist and ask, like, are there rooms available like that?
Exactly, yeah. And you don't have to worry about, I'm not one of these people who likes the booking.com sites or the hotels.com. There's too many games they play, and if it doesn't work out and you can't do it at all, like it's hard to cancel and they want all these fees, so
Non-refundable?
unchangeable.
Country.
Yeah.
Large bet you have to pay extra, and there's all these games, like also the budget airlines as well, same. I swear to you guys, they try always possible to try and make extra from you, because the initial cost is cheap, right?
And it's hard to fool people. If you go to the hotel property itself and you ask to see a room, what can they say? They can't lie and say this is your room doesn't look like that. And you can pay the posted rate, but it might be a little bit different on the websites, but probably not that much different. And if it really is, you can go on the website right there, standing in the hotel lobby and make a booking.
And yeah, that's right. And also you have the flexibility or the chance to actually be at the room and have a look yourself.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You can see if it has a window or not, if it's going to be noisy, like if the party people upstairs, or street noise coming in, or what, just kind of the whole situation.
It's very interesting. I hope we're filming this.
Hope so. Yeah.
So
The adventures of travel, right?
So he's a professional traveler. You just don't care about the environment.
This is a professional traveler. Absolutely. Yeah.
So in case the camera didn't catch it, the dog just pulled in front of us, but that's okay. It's part of traveling. So back to the point where you were talking about, I don't know if it's your personality during your younger days, but for me, I was quite introverted when I started solo traveling first time in Australia, and I knew that I have to force myself to kind of go out there and talk to people because there's no way you can survive alone in a big city if you choose to be introverted. It's just it doesn't work.
Right. When I was that age, whether I sometimes I felt a bit put off. I guess introverted would depend on the environment. If I was going to a place where I didn't feel like I fit in well, like maybe the people there had a lot of money and most of the travelers had a lot of money, then I would try to keep to myself. Like I just didn't feel like I could blend in. Um, and as I've gotten older and have a little bit more money for travel, then I feel like I can fit in at the different verticals with different, levels among the tourists who I meet. I think getting a little older helps because like once you reach 40, you realize that like half the population's older than you and half the population's younger. So you fit in pretty well.
Right, you're kind of in the middle. Like you feel like you can talk to either side.
Talk to either side, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, people, especially in Southeast Asia, they treat you well. They treat you really well. They start saying sir and, Mr.
Hospitality is
Hospitality and
next
like just
level.
your age. Yeah. That said, of course, Southeast Asia is a diverse place. It's 670 million people. One size doesn't fit all. You're talking this, all the way from Davao over to Yangon and Myanmar, right? These are very different places. Some have absorbed a lot of Western culture. Some have absorbed nothing.
Right.
And then sometimes you find a high level of English. Sometimes you find none. Some places have trains. Sometimes you have to fly just a short distance, even though just because there are no buses or trains.
Yeah. I kind of want to know, because there's no Google Translate, how you translate in places like Vietnam or, country that are less proficient in English.
Yeah, Vietnam's a tough case. Most people do not speak English.
Right.
So most of my time in Vietnam, I spent in either Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, which are, as you know, the
Great
biggest,
city.
the big cities, and eventually find people who speak English, usually in the hotels. Um, and then again, you have your maps, so you can find your way around, even though you can't find an English speaker. And commerce is commerce. You can point at things, they point back and talk about the price a little bit, point at the numbers,
Do you
write things
use
down,
you use body gestures?
use body gestures. Yeah, somehow it just never got that complicated. Although in Vietnam, I would often go for work, so I would know somebody there who could speak English, either another foreigner like myself or an English-speaking Vietnamese person. The toughest case was talking to a group of people through a guy who was a lawyer, a Vietnamese lawyer who spoke good English, but he had to go. He was like, had another appointment. He's like, so Ralph, you speak Vietnamese, right? So I'm going to leave you with these people. It's like, no, I'm afraid I don't.
You like put it
Can you
on
stay
the
a little longer?
please. You put it on the spot and then you don't know what to do, right?
know
Like
what to
it's
do.
all by yourself right now in
Yeah.
a foreign country without the
Without the
only
language.
only person that can, rely on, and then all of a sudden you just
Yeah.
left alone.
And I think it turned out that one of the other people did speak a small amount of English, so we got by.
I think it's always sometimes that you find help. Like it doesn't matter. Like when you're solo traveling, when you want something quite badly, I think I don't know how you call it, but the universe somehow finds a way to help you. To
The
help you
universe
out.
does help. And like we are at the core, I think humans are very resourceful. We have that momentum, that excitement, that enthusiasm about travel, and then you have the urgency added to it. So you really need to get something by a certain time to make your trip work out. You will just somehow find people who know. And I think, in Southeast Asia, people want to help. On the whole, they want to help. They have a sense of hospitality. They want to help tourists, foreigners. And it's not just Southeast Asia. All over the world, you meet people like that. But you have to let them know your need. And people that, as you say, the universe will rise to the occasion. And even if it's not the person you ask, they'll know somebody. They'll have family and friends. And eventually they can lead you to somebody who can help.
What does it feel like for your first experience being in Southeast Asia, experiencing that hospitality by yourself? Because I assume it's utterly different from what you experience from America, isn't it? And you feel the genuine connection that they try to establish, and
Yeah.
it's something that I'm very grateful of.
In my first trip to Southeast Asia, I was traveling with a friend. We were traveling for work, but it was very solo. We did a lot of preparation beforehand. I think, prior to the internet and even now with it, you do a lot of work before you set out. So So I make jokes with my wife that like, it's a 3-day trip, but it's actually a 3-month trip because I'd be planning it for 2 months
Wow.
and then go there for 3 days, do your thing, come back, and then, put everything back together, find your photos, find your video, find your notes, tell your stories. And then so during the walk up, during the preparation, ask a lot of questions about what you might find. Like, is this a place where I can go and just get a hotel off the street? What about the safety? What about changing money? What about the prices of things? Can you get scammed? Can you get ripped off? So the first time I went to Southeast Asia, I did a lot of exploration because it was a work-related trip, and I wanted it to go well. And we spent a week there. That was Cambodia. This is Phnom Penh, plus another city in Cambodia that most people don't. We didn't go to Siem Reap like a lot of tourists. We went to this other city called Battambang, which is closer to getting up toward Thailand, and there's no foreigners there.
It's just you
Just
and the
yeah,
locals.
just us.
That's
and my colleagues
always
and
the
locals.
best memories created like
Yeah.
this.
And I think with like the people we met in Cambodia, some people were, warm and hospitable. A lot of people just wanted money. I haven't been back since then, so I don't know what their economic status is. But at that point, it was super poor. And you go, like in Phnom Penh, you go outside and you're surrounded by little kids asking for money. They're just pulling at your pants and saying, money, 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 which they can say in English.
It's crazy that how kids are accustomed to asking for money in Southeast Asia in general. Not just in Cambodia, in Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam also. Some girls in the northern village of Vietnam, like when we do Ha Giang Loop, which means riding a motorbike for a 4-day trip, the young girls were having makeup, having red lipstick, alongside with a group of friends. They're just carrying a very beautiful basket of flowers behind them, and all they have to do is smile and take pictures with tourists, and the tourists will give some pocket money to them.
At least they're offering you a service. You
Yeah.
get something. You get a photo backdrop, and you have a local face in your photo. So if you need
Happiness.
happiness. The fact that a child asks for money, that's a selling point too, because it's harder to say no to a child.
It's very hard to say no. Seeing their lovely smile, and you know that those money means a lot to them, and just playing the cards of sense of empathy, I guess.
Yeah, well, we didn't expect that, and we ended up in a very strange hotel in Phnom Penh. Also, like, talk about being kept awake at night. We had our own room, but then there were people outside the hotel, outside the entrance all night, like talking to each other and playing hacky sack, where they kick a little beanbag thing about yay big from foot to foot to foot, and we could hear it.
They throw the whole night.
But as we were talking about earlier, like, it's going to end because it's only a day long.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, this sucks. This night's going to write off. It's terrible, but we're leaving the next day. So that's
It's all right.
It's all right.
It's part of the journal. So do you journal daily travels when you're traveling?
It depends on the context. If I were to go alone for no purpose other than to sightsee and to experience the country, I probably make some notes. Sometimes write, like a combination of writing text and also making some drawings and then taking photos. If I'm doing it for journalism, then I'm usually busy writing a report of some kind anyway, so I don't bother to write for myself. I'd like to write more for myself, but I get so involved in the news reporting process that I kind of forget to do it.
Right. I remember when during our past conversations, you were talking about travel agencies being a key part in booking all your travels, and this idea sounds quite absurd to me because I book everything on my own. What was the experience like?
So we were talking earlier about how you go online and you have no refund, no changes. We have to worry about oversized bags and all these tricks.
Yeah.
So back in the day, you go to a physical brick and mortar travel agent, or you call them on the phone. You have a long phone conversation. Well, they can get all those tricks. We're still existing. So the industry hasn't really changed so much. But back then, the burden fell to the travel agent, and the travel agent was really your agent. Would try to get you out of these things. So that say you're like, look, I'm going to Mexico City. I have a week to spend there, and here's my budget. and where this many people are traveling, and they figure it out for you. And some, like any profession, some did a great job, some didn't do a great job. Um, but they were so common that there was one in every neighborhood.
Right.
And you could go to their office and they would show you things like this. They had the maps, they had the brochures. They could, here,
So,
would you like to go to Guangzhou? And
right.
you
So
look
they
at
will
all this
open a map
material.
in front of you and then just showing you like which part, which destination you're keen to go, I
Yeah,
guess.
and because we didn't have the internet, we couldn't look for things like this. But they had all these brochures in the office, and he's like, they're really colorful offices, about the size of a mid-sized restaurant, and you could sit across the table with them, and they would let you see all the brochures, and they would talk about the trip. The really good agents would have traveled to the same places where you wanted to go, so they could actually talk about what it's like.
It's very interesting. Like, wait, you speaking of the size of the travel agency, nowadays you can put like 5, 10 seats. I assume every time you step into a travel agency, you expect to stay for an hour or two there.
Could be, yeah. I think maybe you would have an initial conversation that could last an hour, depending on how much you want to know and how busy the agent is. And then after that, there might be some follow-up by phone. The agent would take your case and look around at the flights. Flights are always what's the word? The biggest variable, I think. The prices varied a lot now as they do then as they do now. So, and the agents go online. They had a system called Sabre, the Sabre system, and they could look at all the airlines. Now we have Expedia and
Yeah.
these other agencies. Yeah, but now they had their own. The only agents could see, and they would look at it and they could check all the airlines, and they would know which ones could have the low fares to where you want to go. And they would say, well, that one might work, but that one you have to, there's a layover for 10 hours or something like that. This one has no layover, but it's more expensive, so you talk and talk and talk and finally come to some agreement. Which is the same thing you do now, but you just do it yourself on the computer.
Right. It's very interesting because it's only them who can access the Sabre.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying? For every time you have to book a flight, you have to be in a travel agency.
No, you could do it through the airline also. You could call the airline,
Oh, you could
or
call the
you could even go to the airports and get a ticket.
So
And then the agent would do that for you. The agent, they got enough of a commission somehow from the airlines and hotels, so they would always respond. They always call you back when they're supposed to.
right.
And I remember being at work when I was living in California and taking calls from travel agents, kind of feeling a little embarrassed, like I'm supposed to be doing my work, but the travel agents call me back and I have to deal with it, right? Because these conversations take a while.
Yeah, it's so how do you distinguish which one is a good travel planner or which one is bad? Does it
Yeah, good question. Well, they had brands, kind of like, with going to coffee shops and convenience stores and all that. Some brands are, very well known. They're like chains. You find the same travel agencies in every neighborhood in every city in the U.S. sometimes. So they had a certain reputation. But sometimes the best ones would be those that specialize in the part of the world that you wanted to go to. And then they had a differentiation between like family travel and adventure travel. You could go in either of those directions depending on the kind of trip you wanted. If you wanted to take a trek, then you went to the adventure travel specialist. If you wanted a family vacation, then you went to talk to them.
so is solo travel an option back then?
Solo travel was really common, yeah,
Yeah.
especially for Americans going to Latin America or Southeast Asia. Latin America, perhaps because it's closer, you can cross the land border. And there's a sense that Mexico was close enough and familiar enough so you could just go as an American and just, catch the bus, catch the plane, catch this, catch that, and somehow you just make it.
That raised my next question, which means they have done it before your generation. They have done it themselves. If they are an advisor of adventure travel, which means they have the past experience.
They do, yeah. These travel agents really liked travel. They felt passionate about the business of travel. And they would generally understand, they would at least they had these options called FAM trips, which are called familiarization trips. And this is only for the agents. So like the hotels, I think mostly the hotels, maybe the tour guides on the ground would invite agencies to come for free or at a discount because the resorts and the travel guys wanted the publicity. So they invite all these agents to come down from the U.S. for a free trip to see how it works. So the agent goes home to the United States and they know everything because they've had this free trip.
Wow, I would take that.
Yeah. So it's not a bad way to go. If you're interested in travel, you can become a travel agent.
Ooh.
But we're talking, 1980s, 1990s.
And
I don't know what happened to them all.
And also, I remember when you were saying about the visa, you have to physically be at the visa application, and you can't do it online.
You can't do it online, but sometimes you could mail it in. You could get an application. I'm trying to think how that works. Sometimes the travel agent could help you with that too. They could print out an application for you to different countries that were popular with Americans. They would give you the application. If you lived in a big city, like we were living in Beijing for a while, so you could go to the different embassies from the countries in Beijing and apply there. Or you can sometimes mail your passport to a foreign embassy in Washington, D.C., and they'll mail it back to you. Mail a paper check with money for the visa, and you get it back. That was all part of the planning. If you're going to spend a month or two planning the trip, then the visa became part of that planning process.
Right. Was there ever been a time that is for you it's difficult to get a visa, or like when you were in a foreign country or something like that?
Not for that reason. That the technology didn't stop me from getting a visa. It wasn't fun. You did have to go to the post office, go to the embassy or consulate yourself, pay the money. Never really sure it would come back in the mail when it was supposed to. But that process never stopped me from actually getting a visa.
Never been rejected.
Not for that reason. I've been rejected, but not for that reason. Because I'm a U.S. citizen and a journalist, and you can guess what country rejected me.
Yeah, that's quite apparent.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to make 2 trips for that rejection.
Wow.
The person operating the transaction for visa payments for the local bank branch, they told me I didn't get it.
What are they doing with the visa decision? I mean,
Exactly, I don't know. But I knew I didn't get it. But we also had visas on arrival, like for Indonesia. As you probably know, you show up in the airport, you go get your visa, you pay a fee depending on what country you're from, and then you go to the immigration queue after that. I think Cambodia had visa on arrival, Laos had visa on arrival. Vietnam, you could get it through, it's an e-visa now, I think.
yeah, but then I remember when I did the e-visa for Vietnam, it's supposed to be 1 month, but then you have to wait like 3 to 5 working days for it to be issued to you, which means by the time you get it, you already lost 5 days. It's not a good feeling.
Yeah, I think Vietnam's probably still working on that. And then I remember having to wait a long time in the airport. I had the e-visa proof of payment, but then when you get to Ho Chi Minh City, you have to line up with all these other foreigners and be called to actually get your visa. And then you have to go to the line or the immigration queue with everybody else and have them stamp. So it's a long process.
How long does it take the whole thing?
I think like it could be up to an hour and a half after you get off your plane.
You certainly don't expect that, right?
No, and it's, yeah, that takes time out of especially at night. You land late at night, you just want to get in, to get to your hotel and all that. So
Right. When you're bringing up about airport, I would like to ask, have you ever slept on the airport?
yeah, we did that. Our whole family slept in the Haneda Airport in Japan in 2021
safe.
during COVID because we weren't allowed to go out. We were in transit, but we couldn't leave. So we slept in the chairs that were they're kind of like lawn chairs. They recline back a little bit.
Yeah.
I think during a normal business, like non-COVID, they were massage chairs. But nobody was getting massages, so we just couldn't kick back in these chairs.
You're just using it as a sleeping bed. You don't pay any money for the massage chair. You don't put coins in it. You just lay on it.
Coming back, we flew back through the same airport, had another layover overnight. So that time we just slept in the ordinary chairs. But fortunately, they didn't have the bar in the middle, so we could stretch out.
Yeah. What if there's bar in the middle? What do you do?
Just do that. Good night.
I swear at the airport you never sleep longer than 4 or 5 hours. You just naturally wake up.
That's about right. It was what you were saying earlier about the hostels. you sleep in an airport, somebody will always show up. You have to hear the announcements. You kind of keep an eye on your bag somehow because you may be safe, but you don't know who's who and whether they're safe or not. So the only times I felt a little unsafe would be, outside or after arrival. When there's everybody from everywhere kind of walking around.
Taxi?
Yeah, I don't like taxi
Taxi?
queues. Taxis,
Taxi?
I don't like those
Taxi like
people.
this?
It's not. I feel safe. Like they're not going to rob me, but I don't feel like they're honest business people. So
Yeah.
I don't take those taxis.
So if you don't take taxi, then what do? You take public transport?
I will take taxis, but I go to the queue. We go outside, and like in a lot of Southeast Asia, you'll find a person from some government agency managing the taxi queue.
Really?
Like in Manila, they do it, and I think in Ho Chi Minh City they do it. There's actually a guy there, and the taxis they come, they're regulated meter taxis. They line up, and then you get the guy at the front of the queue, who will say like, okay, you're in line. Where are you going? How many people? How far? And then they write you a slip of paper,
Paper of what?
a piece of paper, just to say who are you going, and you show that to the taxi, so they have to understand it.
They write it in local language?
Yeah. So you already know what's going on by the time you get in there. And then so I think that discourages the taxi driver from taking a big detour and charging a lot of money, or from doing anything else or for telling you like, oh, that's too close. I'm not going to make enough money off you because like that's just like around the corner.
There's usually meter that you can see.
Yeah, they're meters, and they use the city rate, whatever the rate's supposed to be.
Yeah, because when you talk about the government agency standing at the queue, in front of the queue, I don't think I've quite seen it because these days you can easily get an Uber. Like, yeah, by the time you step off the airport, even though if you're without a SIM card, you need to be at the edge of the airport to get the Wi-Fi, and then once you see that it's arriving, then you step off the airport and try to find it. But sometimes it might be on the different floors, so you have to constantly rush to the other floors because they can usually only stay for like 3 to 5 minutes at the airport.
Yeah, there's a bit of suspense, isn't there? If you miss your Uber, then they charge you anyway for it. And I think at the airport, they don't want to wait because it takes time and money away from their business. So.
The thing is, I don't know, like Uber is just too convenient these days. Again, technology, like it makes our generation think less and less of the hard work of getting the taxi or trying to persuade to the taxi driver where you're going, but you don't know the language. All that struggles, it's kind of fading away. It's gone.
Yeah, and I appreciate the ride sharing for taking that suspense out of the process. It's like when you first get into a country, the first day is often the hardest because you don't know. You have to go from the airport to your hotel somehow. You have to have everything in line. That's the day you make it or break it, right? If you make it to your hotel, everything's with you, you still have your money, you haven't been scammed, you're safe and all that, then that's really your biggest achievement of the trip.
The first incident is always the most important, right? Your first impression of that country.
Yeah, and this could all be happening like between midnight and 2 a.m. And you've been up since, however long that you're like, you really need to sleep, but you're still dealing with hotels and traffic and Ubers and all that. But as we know, we both read the same book, 80 Days around the world.
Around the world in 80 days.
So back in the 1870s, these problems were already happening.
But even if it's fiction, I wonder how he come up with the ideology and the concept.
It's fiction, but it's very well researched fiction. It's a strong narrative because those things really existed. The institutions, the places,
The cost.
It's
all very precise.
So what happened? His trains were late or didn't exist. His ships were late or didn't exist. He met people along the way that either helped him or hindered him. And he paid his way out of it every time. He just shell out more money, which you could still do today.
So does that mean money can solve you out of the trouble when you're solo traveling?
I think it does. Like if you think about if you really got stuck, and we have been a couple of times, gotten stuck somewhere without a hotel because we didn't know it was a peak travel season, like they're having a holiday or some kind of event. What'll happen if you can't find a hotel is eventually you'll find one, but it'll be like the super, super expensive room. It'll be a crappy room, and you pay a lot for it. But you can have the room, and you need the room. So you just pay up.
But there was those times where it's happened recently. I was in Vietnam, like sleeping bus from one city to another. Have you heard of sleeping bus? It's like you can actually lay down on the bus, and then 10, 12 hours you wake up in a new city.
I'd like to try that. I'm aware that they exist, but I've never taken one.
In Thailand, in Vietnam, and then you wake up and then you figure out you're in the middle of nowhere, 4:30 a.m.
Go back to sleep.
So then, no, there's no point to get a hotel at that night because in 2 hours the sun gonna rise already.
Yeah, you got to do your thing. 'Cause you
So I remember we were at the we arrived in maybe Ho Chi Minh, and then after eating McDonald's, we try to sleep on the bench in the park, and then those girls and aunties they wake up at 5 a.m. and then they start playing EDM music, electronic music, and then they start working out at the park like with a group of aunties, and there's no way you can sleep through that.
as they say, rather idiomatically, you can sleep when you're dead. So why bother sleeping when you're traveling?
Is that your ideology when you're traveling in your 20s?
I'm afraid that's just the truth. You're not looking for a comfortable 10-hour night of sleep. You're looking for adventure.
All right, so we're back at it again, Ralph.
Always more to say.
So I think I missed one thing in the part one just now. Is I would like to touch on Google reviews. We rely heavily on Google reviews in our generation. I feel like I don't know where will it be without Google reviews. So before going to hostels or hotels, restaurants, the first thing that I do, check if it's meeting the four out of 5 star. If it's not, I'm not even considering. So how was it back then?
Back then, the travel agencies, the physical brick and mortar agencies would have a lot of information about hotels. And they would tell us about hotels, this, not only the star ratings and the amenities, but also the service reputation. They could tell you how close the hotels were to the things you wanted to see or to the airport. So they were our Google reviews of that era. When it came to restaurants, the agents might know something about the really high-end restaurants, but they wouldn't normally know about the night markets, the street food, and some of the middle to lower end, lower budget food that you could get. So the way you do that is you show up, try to get a centrally located hotel, and then when you're hungry, go outside and look for food. See where locals are eating, see where other foreigners are eating, see what's on the menu, and that's part of the adventure.
Right. So it's like when you see all the locals gathering in front of a local store, then you assume that it's good already. Like it's a kind of a promising.
Yeah, you assume that at least locals like it, and if you generally like the local food, then you'll probably like what they're eating.
Very interesting. Because for me, I can't live without Google reviews. Like for our generation, I feel like it does give certain aspects of like a standard, but of course you can't 100% rely on it because there are always customers that's gonna complain either way. It's the same decades ago. It's the same right now. There's always something that you can complain about.
Yeah, and I think back then you could also, I'm just thinking through a little bit more, like you could ask your hotel clerks and concierge people, would you recommend a restaurant in the area? So many things would just depend on asking people locally who would know things, and they would know other things. Sometimes the taxi driver would know somebody who owned a restaurant, and one thing leads to another, to another, to another.
You talk to taxi drivers
Talk
often.
to anybody who will talk. Yeah, and a lot of taxi drivers prefer to talk than to not talk. So
Really
yeah,
interesting.
if you have a common language with them, like in Manila, you talk to your taxi drivers a lot because they speak English. We speak Chinese, so you go to Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou and talk to your taxi drivers. In Vietnam and Thailand, I didn't say anything because I couldn't.
Because of the loss in translation.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when I start traveling, I started more and more enjoying the conversations with the locals, especially like taxi drivers, because for sure they know a thing or two about their local area. I always ask about what's your favorite food, and they will assume that I want tourist food, but no, like I want to know what you usually eat on a day-to-day basis. You know, the good stuff, the cheap stuff, the stuff that they get to eat every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. You get that only from locals. I don't think that a travel agency could ever tell you that. And I think even now with the internet and with reviews and all that, they capture a lot, but they can't capture everything. You'll always find on the ground some place that simply doesn't have a listing with, the websites that you and I might look at.
Because the thing is, let's say in Hong Kong, when you are tired at work, like people in Hong Kong take taxi very frequently, right, after work because it's relatively cheap compared to American or European cities. But I think in general, people just zone out in their music. They put on their headphones. Even sometimes I do it as well. After work, I don't want to talk to anyone, or I just want to be in my own space. So you don't really talk in conversation with taxi drivers. So I think that's one of the key difference in two generations of travelers as well. We have the choice to be in comfort in the public spaces, but then also it loses the essence of human connection at some point.
Yeah. I think traveling, I like travel more for the human connection than for any other aspect of it. I do enjoy scenery and I like eating and I like looking at whatever attractions I feel attracted to. But more than anything else, I like knowing a country through the people who I meet.
Because in our generation we have all the knowledge through the internet, but then telling a story through another human and listening to every slight different versions of different human beings. I think that's the essence. And more and more I try to I try to pursue that during my solo travels, because I feel like it's fading away.
But I think people will still talk to you during your solo travels if you reach out and say something.
Oh yeah.
People will talk back to you. So
It's just becoming less and less common. Just the same as dating apps versus when you guys, I don't know, like you go up to a local bar and show up and talk to people like that. It's becoming more and more rare now.
oh, yeah, it's always when you're dating, your first meeting is face to face instead of through some other channel. Yeah.
So it's during your 20s that you walked the road that less people walked, and you made the decision out of courage, out of you know that you want something more than a corporate job. Was it an easy decision for you?
Yeah, I think in my 20s, money made the decision for me. I didn't have much money, so when you don't have much money, you need to walk a road less traveled because generally that's a cheaper road than the road more traveled. More traveled some road is, the more things cost along that road in terms of hotels and services, food, whatever you want. You go to a less traveled road, you take buses and trains and things like that. You see more for one thing. So if I had to go back and redo that part, I think I would slow down a bit because problem being in my 20s, I listened to people around me say, okay, when you go to this city, you have to see the following 5 attractions, and then you have to eat this. You have to go to a certain part of the city and experience the culture, whatever it is. And they weren't wrong, but I would have had more fun if I had just gone and just sat in one place longer and just like walked around the neighborhood that had no reputation at all, just to kind of absorb what people were doing and how they lived.
People watching,
People watching.
absorbing the whole environment. It doesn't necessarily be, back to the point where we're talking about Google reviews. You have all these high review ratings of popular destinations, but from my experience, it's usually the road less traveled that makes you think of more meaningful to you as an overall travel experience.
Yeah, eventually I realized that the road less traveled just means the road through the normal native part of a foreign city or a foreign country, which I'm not going to see as much of if I travel the way I'm supposed to, as the travel agents would recommend, or according, if you read a book like this, these tour guides, they tell you a lot about the locations that you're supposed to see, the the socially accepted attractions in a certain country or city. But that doesn't mean most locals don't go to those attractions on a regular basis, and you don't see how they're living.
In overall, would you say that you are living your best years during your 20s?
They weren't really the best years of my life because I didn't have much money. Now I'm like kind of a normal middle class guy. So when I travel, I know I can afford to go where I want to go and do what I want to do. In my 20s, I felt a little bit anxious too when I traveled, like I had to see these things. And I didn't have that much experience as a traveler. So if you were to tell me when I was 20 years old that I had just missed a boat or missed a train, I would panic. Like, now what do I do? I have to be home in a few days and I have to be back at work. If that happened now, like, I'll call somebody, I'll get another train, I'll get a taxi, I'll do what I need to do this. I know about all these other ways
Yeah.
to get it done. But back then it was like just boom, panic, awful.
Single visions.
Yeah, single vision.
Right.
Not knowing where it might end.
Because it's anxious and also you're on a limited budget, so you never know what next day is going to come at you. And I think that's a scary part about solo travel as well, is that your lack of experience, lack of human connection as well, and you're in a big city, you face everything on your own. But that being said, I think for my answer will be, if I have to do it all again, I would still choose the same way. Was it for you the same?
I would go to the same places. I would use the same local means of transit. I would talk to the travel agencies at home. I would do it the same way, but I would I think I would slow down. I wouldn't try to see all the recommended places. Just go to the things that I really want. Like, know myself. Like, I'm not that interested in plazas and like big outdoor sculptures and stuff. I would just skip all that. I prefer landscapes, go to the mountains, go to the coastlines,
Being in nature.
and normal neighborhoods. Like just walking down an alley like we're here now and listen to people, look at people, see how they live. Do more of that.
It's all the struggles and the experience that made you who we are today. Like, as you said, now you don't bother as much about missing a flight or missing a next trip because you know that there are multiple ways from your experience that you will be just fine.
It happens so often. Maybe I know that I won't be just fine, but I know there's a way out. I know where the boundaries are. If I miss a flight, I know the worst possible situations I have to pay for another ticket myself. And maybe I can't get it until the next day. So I'm a day late getting wherever I need to go the next time. That's the worst thing that happens.
Yeah. I mean, what could be worse, right? Like, from my experience as well, like, since the time that when I start solo traveling versus now, the more I see, the more I feel like, the next day we're gonna come and you just be fine. Like, even if you miss your flight, it's okay. What's worst gonna happen? You sleep at the airport. What's worst gonna happen? As long as no one takes your money. I remember during my trip in the Middle East, my bank card got captured. I have like 500 HKD cash left in me. That was a tough situation. Because when my card got captured, and then I talked to the bank receptionist, they say, you can only get back the card tomorrow morning, but then I have a flight to the next country on that night. So I was really panicking. I was panicking at first, but then I was blank. I was leaving blank space for the next 2 hours because there's nothing I can do. I just sit at the bank branch and, I don't know, pray, even though I don't believe in God. And then I think when they saw me this miserable face or like emotionless face, they say, okay, we'll try to find someone to help you within the next 2 hours. So I sat on the branch for like a whole afternoon, and then and then I got your card. I got my card, and So it's experience like this happening more and more that makes me feel like there's nothing that can stop me either way. If it's all in your heads, whether you want to make it a bad experience, travel experience, or not, it's all in your head. And whether how you perceive the difficulties or how you come out of it, that's more important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with something like that, I would still panic a little bit, because you don't know. You don't know what the outcome will be, if you get your car back or not. Whereas if you completely miss a flight, you know the outcome is you have to get another vehicle. You have to get another one. But those suspenseful moments are really tough still for me.
That's
I haven't learned anything. You still pray, you still panic.
You still very you still panic? Do you still panic these days when you're traveling?
About something like that, I might, yeah, because you just don't know what's the outcome, and you can't really, you can't tell people in the next place I'm going to be late, I'm going to be a day late. And you just like you can't. You're just stuck in that little time zone where you don't know what the outcome is.
When you are in your 20s or 30s, you have the urge to find something purposeful in your life. That's why you chose this road. Do you feel lost at some point?
Yeah, probably every day. You don't really know exactly what you
Every day.
every day you're reevaluating where you want to go, and you get older, you have a little bit less time left in the world, so you try to make smarter decisions, try to narrow things down to what you want to do, and take out a lot of old ambitions. Things that would be nice to do, but they're not that nice to do. Make sure I'm focusing on the things that I really want to do. Get that done. Sure, but is there a clear answer? No. Is it the same answer every day? No. Always asking the same questions again and again and again.
So it's more like the flow. Like some days you feel like you're maybe on top of the world, you have a great travel experience, but some days you're miserable. You wonder about life. What am I doing in the new city? Why am I here? You know, asking yourself constantly about the purpose.
Yeah, I think as I get older, I take more trips, but shorter ones. So if the answer's not clear to me, I'm done in 3 days. Whereas before, I would travel for a week or 2 weeks.
So when the answer is not clear for you, you just reset yourself.
Yeah, I'm done. You finish like, well, the answer's not clear. I'm done in 2, 3 days.
Right. So that means you're not in a rush to find the answers. You know that throughout time you figure more and more out.
Yeah, and I may never have an answer, so be it. Answers are you know, a bit of a fairy tale. I'm afraid we might never know what an answer is.
But there was a couple of really bad incidents that happened to us.
Really?
When you asked that question earlier about, oh my God, we had two really bad incidents when we went into hotels without checking any ratings. There was prostitution going on.
Prostitution.
Oh yeah, in Seoul,
Which country?
Korea.
So
Yeah.
it was a nice fancy hotel. They were running this prostitution thingy on the floor. The other one was in Taipei when we landed at the airport, didn't know where to go, and they had an information desk. And then the lady said, "Oh, what's your budget?" And we said, "Really low."
Hi.
And they told us to go to this hotel. And oh my God, it was a whorehouse.
Well, it was in Wanhua. Yeah.
Sitting at night,
Oh.
Yeah.
go out to the lobby to talk to the lady. She's like, "I don't hear anything."
Of course, she's gonna.
Next day, say
Cameras
anything.
in the ceiling.
You have these fond memories.
I do remember those too. Yeah. And they were both referrals from the airports in their respective countries, cities, like the Seoul airport and the Taipei airport had those. That's another thing. Before we had ratings and online presence, if you didn't get a recommendation from your travel agency, you could just go to the airport. They would often have a kiosk of hotels, different budget ranges. Yeah, I don't think the airports knew. I don't think they had any idea what they were really recommending.
How many nights you spend in those?
In Seoul, we checked out before. There was the hotel. The operator, the person at the desk, understood it wasn't going to work out, and so we just want our money back. We're getting out of here. Just let us go. The one in Taipei, I think we had to spend the first night, and we got out somehow. Another issue getting older is like so many of those memories add up. It's hard to bring them back out on without thinking for longer. So it's probably a lot more things like that I'll remember later and she'll remember later, but I can't tell you now because I just don't remember now.
Yeah. Does it?
So we need to have like a part 4 at some point.
We can have many parts as possible. It could be just the beginning. We wanted to co-write a book at some point.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, because I do this sometimes, I wonder if you do the same too. When I close my eyes, I think of the travel memories. Like it's just flashing by right in front of my eyes, like it's just yesterday sometimes. Do you feel the same sometimes?
Yeah, I do actually. And sometimes if I'm at home and I'm going to work and I feel like the days are very routine, like I'm doing the same physical motions every day, then I tend to wander back in my mind to some kind of travel period.
It's a good feeling to have, isn't it?
Yeah, but I really want to go. It's good because I remember it fondly, but it's not good because I really want to go and I can't.
I get that feeling very well.
Yeah.
I know it very well. I'm sure the fellow travelers listening to this have the same feeling too.
You don't want to be stuck.
You don't want to be stuck. You want to be a free spirit as much as possible. But then money comes your way, and it's a different story. Like we said, money does help you out when you're in trouble, when you are solo traveling.
80 days around the world taught me that more than anything else. I had no idea how much money you could spend back then to get simple things done.
Yeah, I learned it in my Middle East trip as well, especially solo traveling in Saudi Arabia. Crazy. Because there's no public transport there. And then all you can do is Uber. So would you say we can wrap up this episode of podcast with the last question that I have with Ralph? This is kind of important question to me, because like I said, I learned a lot from continuous conversations with Ralph throughout the past year or two. I would like to know if you were having a chance to face or talk with your younger self, what important advice would you give to your younger self?
I guess continuing on that theme, I would say appreciate every place that you go, even if it's not your ideal hotel or the ideal flight and you're stuck in an airport and it's kind of gnarly and the food tastes bad and it's hot and mosquitoes and things like that. Just try to capture the moment visually or audio in my own mind so that I can remember it. Do a little bit more journaling, but not just superficial stuff, like not just I'm here now and this is what it costs and all that. Not to be so much of a journalist about it, but just to be more of like to see into myself and into the experience. To talk more about the people, like I wish I had kept a travelogue of the individual people who I spoke to on these trips instead of just like, I'm at this restaurant and the beer costs, $50 or something like that, and tomorrow we're going to go to the airport. That's how I kept my travelogue, thinking I want to look back on it and do it again. Because without the internet, we actually relied a lot on our own notes to go back to places and remember things. But I really want to remember more than anything else people who I met on these trips. But I don't have notes for those.
So that means the key to this part is to be in the present moment when you are in a foreign country. Yeah. Just be there.
Like on a good day, maybe you have a flight at 6 p.m. and you're checking out at 11. You sit it's a nice hotel. You're sitting in the cafe, passing some time. Just sit there longer, spend more time there, checking people out. Let the minutes turn into hours, and don't worry about the flight. Don't worry about getting the taxi and all that. Just until you have to.
Right, because there's no rush anyway, right?
Quite, yeah. But you could create a rush in your mind if you want to. It's like, well, I don't know if that taxi's really going to make it. I should have a backup, and should I save money and try to find public transit to the airport? Yeah, but it's so complicated, and there's no direct bus.
This is the struggle where our generation is facing because we have distractions all around us. We constantly feel the urge to check our phones. Okay, does it meet our Google ratings, or are we following the same routes that we supposed to be? Then we have to constantly turn on our phone and check if we are on the right route. Be in there, be in that. But just like slow down a little bit.
Yeah,
It's fine if you don't know all the answers.
exactly.
And
But you know you have what you have in hand, right? You know you are where you are, and you can appreciate that as much as you can while you're there.
all right, I think that's kind of approaching to the wrap of our episode, and it could be a very good beginning of us co-writing experience of two generations, how it differs solo traveling in terms of solo traveling, and key elements that still persist throughout the years.
Yeah, thanks for considering the older generation and the fact that a lot of things haven't changed. The technology has, and the way we do things has, but what we do hasn't really changed that much. So
The adventure spirit inside each and every
Exactly.
one of us. You just need to get out there and explore. Hey, thank you for coming to this city backdrop, little setup here. And I'm just very glad we put it on record finally.
yeah, thanks for having me on such an influential travel show too.
Hopefully it will turn
It's
into
an honor for us.
And we'll make a positive impact out of it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Peace. Cute.
Oh,
Wow, we talked so long.
yeah.
Man. 1 hour and a half.
Is that what it was? Damn.